Why don't you have a seat and tell me what appears to be the problem? I'm taking notes here as to timestamp, so the first question for today for Consult the Doctor is, and I'm paraphrasing and abbreviating these things a little bit. What about Palladium nib experience in Kazu the Homo sapiens? Yeah, look, Palladium nibs are fascinating, but there are massive differences between one Palladium nib and the other nib. We're talking about Visconti, right? No one else immediately comes to mind for Palladium nibs. As I understand the story, there are generations of Palladium nibs, and there are huge differences. Some Palladium nibs are full flex nibs. Other Palladium nibs are stiff as a nail and completely rigid. Some Palladium nibs don't write, and no matter what you do, they simply won't write. Why? I don't know. Other Palladium nibs write beautifully. I would say that if you have a Palladium nib that happens to be well tuned, it's an absolutely wonderful writing experience, if it is indeed well tuned. But sometimes they appear to leave the factory and they are not well tuned, and then sometimes it's almost impossible to make them write yourself, and you really need to retain the services of a nibmeister to make that nib right. So in other words, I can't say, well, Palladium nibs are great or Palladium nibs are terrible. Unfortunately, the answer is it varies from nib to nib. You need to go to a shop and try it out. And if that's not an option, then I don't know what to tell you, because you cannot judge online looking at a nib whether it will write perfectly or not. You just can't. So there is that. Check the return policy of a shop so that you know what will happen if you're not happy with that particular nib. And that's the end of it, right? Now, I think Visconti is phasing out the Palladium nibs and is moving towards gold, back towards gold, which I think is a wise choice, given there was just so much variability in the Palladium nibs. Again, I have handled a lot of Palladium nibs. Look at the Visconti reviews on my website. Look at the number of Visconti reviews on my website. Some Palladium nibs were fantastic, others were terrible. Some didn't even write. This is all I can tell you. Now, continuing kind of in this vein, could problems with Italian pens be traced back to the nib sourcing? For example, some companies make nibs in-house and don't seem to have many problems. Others use B.R.E nibs. This is what Visconti does, for example, or at least did. Maybe is it a matter of too little quality control, or are German nibs generally inferior to Japanese nibs? Now, that last thing, that would be a bit of a sweeping statement. I will say this. Across the board, and I've used a lot of pens with German nibs, B.R.E, Jowo, and Schmidt, but isn't Schmidt a subsidiary of B.R.E? Anyway, and then a lot of Japanese nibs, and also, by the way, some German nibs made in-house, and then Japanese nibs. And I will say, I have had significantly p smaller than 0.0001, significantly fewer issues with Japanese nibs than with German nibs. But given the huge amount of German nibs I have used, because when you think about it, most nibs in the world that are not made in-house are B.R.E or Jowo. Most nibs work fine when they come from these brands. Most nibs work fine. And then there are some issues sometimes. Now, when we get to Italian pens, what a minefield. What a minefield we're walking into, because now all kinds of things come into play. People's opinions on these pens. The distinction between collectors and users. Collectors don't care about whether their pens write because they collect them. And then they put them on a desk to look pretty, and that's it. I'm really exaggerating now, and I'm not trying to sound mean, but a true collector does that. They don't use it, they collect. And as soon as you use the pen, it devalues, so, But every time I say something like that, people get very angry with me. For the same reason that I cannot call people accumulators, because then people get very angry with me. So, what I'm trying to say is, Is it a matter of quality control? Of course it is. Of course it's a matter of quality control, because any nib that doesn't write shouldn't leave the factory. But the reality is that it does. And it happens a lot. And I do think that some brands suffer from that problem disproportionately. And then every time Visconti comes up. Yeah, I have owned, reviewed, and used a lot of Viscontis. I have to admit, a disproportionate number of Viscontis had nib issues. It's true. They had issues. Some wrote beautifully and were among the best writing, most beautifully writing nibs I've ever used. Others were unusable. And a lot were somewhere in between. Well, that sounds like a quality control issue, because then there is no consistency. If at the very least every nib would just write terribly, well then at least there's consistency. And you know what to expect. But this is just a game that I like to play, that I like to call Italian roulette. You don't know what you're going to get, right? It could write, it could not write. Now I will say, I do find, because I think it's an interesting question, I'm definitely not trying to make light of it. I do think it's an interesting question because I have found that some of the brands, Italian brands that make nibs in-house, for example, Aurora, I don't remember really having issues with Aurora nibs. I do remember issues with Visconti. I do remember many issues with Montegrappa. Montegrappa didn't used to make the nibs in-house. So I think we're on to something, maybe. And please understand, I'm not trying to bash any brand. I have some Viscontis that I absolutely love. But I will be honest, they all have the old-style gold nibs. And the Palladium nibs, I've had way more issues with. I think that addresses it, because I can go on for a very long time, but I think this covers what I was trying to say. I'm not trying to be mean. I'm not trying to be unpleasant. But yeah, there are certain issues with Italian pens. And relatively speaking, I do think there are way fewer issues with Japanese pens. I've also used many Sailors, Platinums, Pilots, especially with Sailor. I don't recall nib issues, and I've handled a few in my time. Okay, here's a very simple, very practical question. Are the older Leonardo MomentoZero Grandes upgraded with the new full piston and the smoother cap lip? The short answer is I don't have a clue. I really don't know. I would assume so, for the very simple reason, which may be a terrible reason, reasoning, maybe terrible reasoning. I would assume that it's easier to just say, okay, from now on, all the caps have that lip and no longer this lip, because otherwise you're not really streamlining your production. So I would assume that happens, and I would also assume that the fancy, shiny, new piston filler, which is an actual piston filler, not a captive, etc., right, which people enjoy. I was not articulating, and not a captive converter, right, but an actual piston filler that people seem to love. I would be surprised if the MomentoZero Grandes are not going to go there. However, I am not Salvatore Matrone, so I do not know. We should ask Salvatore. Okay, now the final question is my philosophical question for the day, and it's one that I thought was a fantastic question. And I'm paraphrasing again, but I'm going to abbreviate this to, what about inexpensive Chinese pens? Should low price really be equated with cheap, and is that fair? This I think is a great question, and I have recently addressed this in a video, and it was a pen review, and I'm completely blanking on which one it was. I'm so sorry, but it is to come out soon, I think, about Chinese pens. So I think this is a discussion we absolutely need to have. And again, I did that in that video, but given that the question was asked here, I want to have that discussion again, because I think it's a very important discussion. And I would very much love everyone to weigh in the comments. I think we have seen in the past few years, and I'm really talking about few years, a massive change in the production of Chinese pens. Initially, it was very easy, I know this because I have done this, to find $1 or $2 pens from China that often included shipping. Sometimes $5 pens that included shipping. I got a lot of Jinhaos that way. Or even $10 for the pen including international shipping. And I think that has definitely evoked the image of Chinese pens equals cheap. Now, when I say cheap, I've also learned in my quote-unquote career as a reviewer that some people find that word has a negative connotation. It doesn't do so much in Dutch, which is my native language, but that may be because we have been merchants for a very long time and we're stingy, so we like cheap. But I'm generalizing now. Okay, so if we let go of that for just a second, okay, let's assume that cheap does not immediately mean bad. It just means inexpensive. That's all I'm trying to say. So the denotation is inexpensive. The connotation we forget about for just a second. It just means inexpensive. A pen you don't pay much for. I think what we are seeing now, what we have been seeing in the past few years, is very interesting developments. Because now we are seeing pens coming from China that are not necessarily $2, $5, $10, $15. They're more expensive, $30, $40, $50. I'm very acutely aware of the People's Republic of China versus Taiwan and how that can be a little sensitive. I don't mean to offend anyone, but look at some of the Taiwanese brands. I'm thinking, for example, of TWSBI, right, which has made affordable pens that are not $5, right? But I think TWSBI was, the original TWSBI's $50 for a piston-filled pen, which is a pretty good deal. And now I think we are starting to see more and more brands like that. Now that is a Taiwanese brand. Again, I'm aware of the nuances there. But take something else. Pen BBS. I don't own a lot of rollerballs, but I own this. Pen BBS, the 309. It's a nice pen. It has a piston filler. You can use it with fountain pen ink. You can put in a fountain pen nib, or you can unscrew that unit and screw in a rollerball tip, which I do because sometimes I too have need of a rollerball, and then I may want to use fountain pen ink. And it works very well. I also think this is a pretty nice looking pen. And I've had experiences back in the day with certain Chinese pens, I'm going to be very frank, falling apart. Just breaking down after maybe a year of use. Parts would come off. They would break down. I've had this pen for quite a while now. You can look up the review of the Pen BBS 309. See how long I've had it. This thing is used. It's been inked up a lot. It's been in bags a lot because I would use it in different places, carry it with me to, if I have to go to the post office, fill something out, whatever, that kind of stuff. It's still in very good shape. So I think we have to let go of of two ideas. And that's the same thing I tried to argue in that review video. I think we have to let go of Chinese pens equals cheap, but also of the idea, which is related but not the same, Chinese pens must be cheap. We see now, I think, this movement, as I said, with pens coming from China that are not $5, $50. I've seen some that are $60, $70, $80, but that look nice, made of acrylics, fancy acrylics. Some glow in the dark, some have fun functions like that. And I think it's a really nice development to see not just these pens, but seeing pens of quality. unfortunately, I forgot to take it out here, but I recently received, it's not a fountain pen, it's a ballpoint, from a company called Wuben. And Wuben is a company that, as I understand it, kind of specializes in flashlights. But they also made some pens with built-in lights. The pen I'm talking about is the Wuben E61 Gecko. It's going to be reviewed. It is reviewed at this point, sorry. Now I just have to keep like recording chronological order, etc. It is up. I thought that was an astonishing pen. Made of aluminum, has a light, comes with a little charger cable, is a ballpoint, comes with a glass breaker tip, all kinds of functionality, but very well thought through functionality, and it's a solid product. I'm not trying to sort of make commercial for this particular pen here. I'm just using this as an example of this is a product that comes from China, that has a bright light on it, that has a pleasant writing ballpoint tip, that has a glass breaker for people who use that. This, I think, as I say in the review, would be a very good law enforcement pen. So I think it's important to let go of this idea. What comes from China is not necessarily cheap. And more so, I think, what comes from China, I see pens of increasing quality. Again, this Pen BBS 309, it's still going strong. Nothing has broken, nothing has come off, nothing. I have seen more expensive pens where rings start to come off and that kind of stuff. It's still going. So I understand there are ethics. I understand there are ethics involved. I understand sweatshops. I understand low wages. I understand all these things. That may be a discussion for another day. I'm not trying to skirt that. I'm just saying I understand there are all these issues. But what I'm seeing now is pens that are no longer $1. They're actually going up in cost, but it seems to be, to me, also in quality. And I think that's completely fair and how it should be. So I think we need to change our thoughts a bit on how we conceptualize the quote-unquote the Chinese pen. I don't know if this was useful or maybe boring, but it's something that's been on my mind a lot recently, because I also received a couple of pens from different Taiwanese companies. Again, I understand the distinction, but Wuben is Chinese. But think of many of these Taiwanese companies. There is TWSBI, there is Laban that's been around for a long time, there is Fine Writing. All of these companies, and there are others, make wonderful pens, very good pens, at very affordable prices. Something like Laban, well, that's not a $5 pen. These are, I don't want to say super expensive pens, but these are $100, $150 pens. But they're very well made. And again, that's Taiwan. But please forgive me, and just for the sake of argument. Now, I really wonder what you think and how you feel about this debate. Because I think at this point it is a debate, because again, people are asking me about it. And we see so many of these brands doing interesting, fun stuff these days. Now, I think it's very interesting to think about these concepts. So I wonder what you think. So please let me know. Leave me a comment, whether you agree, disagree, it doesn't matter. I'm just interested to see what people feel about that. And that's it. So I hope this was useful. I'll gladly see you later. Bye-bye.